Welcome to our lecture on neurons. Neurons are specialized cells that conduct impulses throughout the nervous system. There are three types of neurons. There are afferent neurons, efferent neurons, and interneurons. Afferent neurons are sensory neurons, meaning that they collect information from our senses and take it to our brain and back down to our senses. Efferent neurons are motor neurons. That means they collect information from our movement and our muscles and glands and take that information to our brain and back again. And then interneurons are connectors. We have many more interneurons in our brain than we do afferent or efferent, and the interneurons connect the other two types. So if you look at this initial picture on our first slide, you can see the tangled web of so many neurons in our brain connecting with other neurons to send information throughout our nervous system. Now, there are 5 parts of the neuron. The first part is the cell body. The cell body is also called the soma. The cell body or soma contains the life-sustaining mechanisms of the neuron, meaning if you kill a cell body, you kill the neuron. The dendrites are the second part of the neuron. The dendrites are like this branch-like structure that comes out of the cell body, and they are the primary receivers of information. So they primarily receive the information, move it through the cell body, and then out through the axon, which is the third part. The axon is this tail-like structure. This tail-like structure that transmits the message down it and out into a fluid-filled gap called a synapse, so that the next neuron can then pick up the message and transport it down. The fourth part that we're going to talk about is the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath is a white fatty insulator. Almost looks like marshmallows on a string. And what it does is it insulates the neurons so that the messages can move more efficiently. And then the nodes of Ranvier are the little spaces in between the myelin sheath. And those little spaces provide a regeneration point, a point where the neuron's message can breathe so that it can move more efficiently down the axon. This again shows another example of what a neuron looks like with the soma or the cell body, the dendrites, the axon, the myelin sheath, and then those little spaces or gaps in between, which we call the nodes of Ranvier. So what happens in a neuron? Well, a neuron has a neural impulse. And the neural impulse is the change in permeability in the electrical charge of the neuron. So at rest, a neuron has a negative electrical charge, which means that there are more negative ions inside the neuron than outside. When the neuron starts to fire, there's a change in the electrical charge. So at firing, the neuron opens up doors and lets all the positive ions in. The negative ions start to filter out, and we get a positive charge. That sudden reversal in charge from negative to positive is called an action potential. When a neuron reaches its threshold, its level where it has to fire, then what will happen is that we will have reached the action potential and the neuron will fire. Now, a neuron can fire with a weak stimulus, meaning that few neurons are firing at the same time, or a strong stimulus where multiple neurons are firing at the same time, or many neurons are firing at the same time. So this image shows that pump or that change in ion electrical charge. Okay, so in a resting neuron, there are more negative ions inside the neuron than outside. Outside, there are more positive. The doors open, the positives flood in, negatives go out, and we have a change in permeability or a change in charge. And then after the firing occurs, the doors close, the negatives return, positives go out, and we go back to the negative charge. So after the action potential, or as the action potential is happening, we're following what's called an all or none law, meaning that a neuron will fire at full force or it will not fire at all. There is no half firing with neurons, or they don't turn around and go, whoops, made a mistake, I'm stopping. After the action potential, the ion channels will close, not allowing the positive ions to enter, and the negative ions will re-enter. And then the neuron enters what's called a refractory period, which is a period of rest where they will not fire again. Now, that period of rest for neurons is milliseconds. So that's why you can do repeated activities like waving your hand, and there's not a delay in your response. Now, the second part of this is neurotransmitters, and we will talk about that in the next video.